Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Today, Dr. Lareb is going to give you a talk on basic of endourology. So this is a very basic topic we have gone through every day. So, Dr. Lareb.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. So, as you all know, my name is Lareb, and I'm going to continue the basic of endourology today. Today's talk will be about the percutaneous nephrostomies, ureteric stents, and a cystoscope. So, starting with the percutaneous nephrostomy, Godwin et al. In 1955 first placed a percutaneous tube in a hydronephrotic kidney. So, it's basically an interventional procedure which is used to divert and decompress the kidney. Indications, as far as the indications are concerned, they are broadly categorized into two categories, the diagnostic as well as therapeutic indication, but here for the purpose of age we are dividing them into four broad indications. First of all, to relieve the urinary obstruction in case the patient is having pyonephrosis and acute renal failure, intractable pain because of obstructed kidney. Diagnostic testing, as far as the integrated pyelogram is concerned, which we be doing in our OTs and for the Whitaker test. For urinary diversion in cases of iatrogenic ureterial injury and inflammatory or malignant fistulas.
Lareb. So, few words about the Whitaker test. What is Whitaker test? Actually, Whitaker test is upper tract urodynamics pressure flow study. It was done before pre-MAG scans. So to rule out obstructed from non-obstructed. So now it is almost obsolete, not done in Pakistan, but so due to MAG scan. So in which we put a PCN and infuse a saline at 10 ml per minute, and to see the intrapelvic pressure. If the pressure is less than 10 centimeter of water, then it is unobstructed. And if the intrapelvic pressure is between 10 and 15, then it is equivocal. Then we will do a retrograde or antegrade pyelography to see the obstruction. And if it is more than 20, then it is definitely obstruction. Like same as a MAG scan TOF. So, okay.
The PCN tube can use for the therapeutic intervention as well. For example, the stone removal, percutaneous dilatation of ureteric stents, removal of foreign bodies, tumor fulguration, medications like as chemotherapy and BCG induction via this PCN, and biopsy of upper tract lesions.
We also do a chemolysis, stone fragmentation, by giving some solution like Sabes solution or potassium citrate to fragment the stones in some condition where the patient is unfit for surgery or other cause. So we can also do a fragmentation, chemolysis of the stone through a percutaneous nephrostomy also. That. Okay.
So what are the contraindications of PCN? Anyone? Who have seen PCN in our settings? Please raise your hands. PCN किसने होते हुए देखा है?
Dr. Najam.
Yes, Dr. Najam, what are the contraindications of PCN placement?
Renal mass. If there is a renal mass or there is a derangement of the coagulation profile.
So describe the contraindication, absolute or relative. No? So what are the absolute contraindications?
So Dr. Najam is very right. The absolute contraindication is uncontrolled bleeding diastasis. While the relative contraindications are if the patient is uncooperative or the patient is having severe respiratory distress. They are relative because we can change the position and we can change the approach to do that PCN. So what are the ideal nephrostomy tubes? Ideal nephrostomy tube should be having a biocompatible material. It's easy to insert, having good flow characteristic. It's resistant to infection, incrustation and dislodgement, and does not induce symptom to the patient. So earlier I have heard from one of my senior that he was asked in talks of part 2 exam that what are the tubes we can use as a nephrostomy tube, as a PCN inpatient. So we are discussing here a few tube designs that can be used as a percutaneous nephrostomy. Councilman catheter. This is basically a catheter that is being used for the drainage of lower as well as upper urinary tract. Is having a tip. It's having a hole. So this catheter is used where we need to change frequently. Via this hole, we can pass a guide wire and change this catheter over it. The second one is Sky's tamponade balloon. It is this tube having two parts. The one part is the balloon part and other part is the central drainage system. This Sky tamponade balloon was used when we proceeded for PCNL and there is hematuria to arrest that post PCNL bleeding. This sort of tamponade balloon is being used. The balloon gives a tamponade effect while the central portion gives a drainage to urine. So where do we use Knelton catheter as a nephrostomy tube? Yes, Dr. Furkani. Where do we use Knelton catheter as a percutaneous nephrostomy? Where do we use? Have you seen Knelton catheter being placed as a percutaneous nephrostomy?
No.
We placed post PCNL percutaneous nephrostomy, right? For post PCNL drainage, we put in the Knelton tube. Foley's catheter. Anyone have seen Foley's catheter being placed as a percutaneous nephrostomy? Fahad. So after doing pyelonephrotomy, we place the percutaneous nephrostomy. Percutaneous nephrostomy doesn't mean that someone patient is presenting at emergency and you have placed a pigtail drain. That's only percutaneous nephrostomy. It indicates it includes all of the tubes, including post PCNL, including post pyelonephrotomies. Every PCN by definition is just a percutaneous tube that is draining the kidney. So these are various tubes that are being used as a percutaneous nephrostomies. Foley's catheter after pyelonephrotomy we use as a percutaneous nephrostomy drainage. Other tubes are Melicott catheters. They have been used as a percutaneous nephrostomy because they are having a good retaining mechanism. This is an expanding flower-like ballooning end. It is attached with a wire. By pulling out that wire, it inflates and it is a good retaining mechanism. Those they are mentally not well, not sound, and they can pull the nephrostomy tube. So these sort of Melicott catheters are being frequently used in those patients because it is having a good retaining mechanism.
Actually, these Melicott and Depazer catheter, they are placed in when there is a thick pus.
Yes.
So they have wide
because they are
bones,
having
so
a larger diameter for the drainage as
They
compared.
are placed in.
Even in percutaneous nephrotomy, this Knelton catheter can be placed when you are perinephric space or somewhere you are expecting thick pus,
Yes, with very
like sauce sepsis or something.
So again, the Depazer catheter, we have been discussing this catheter earlier. It is having a mushroom-like end and this acts as a retaining mechanism for this catheter. Circle nephrostomy tubes. They are having basically two ends with an internal drainage system. These sort of tubes were used earlier in patients where there was upper tract bleeding. These sort of tubes basically used for the irrigation of upper urinary tract.
Now these are used if we are doing PCNL with multi-track. Then we provide the drainage to both tracks. Then by circular also.
So another type of tube can be used as a percutaneous nephrostomy, re-entry catheter. Re-entry catheter having two parts. The one part that is placed at the kidney and the other tail. The tail goes into the ureter. What is the use of that re-entry catheter? This is being used while we are planning for a second sitting PCNL. Because this end goes into the ureter, so if we are going for a second sitting of PCNL in same patient, we can place a guide wire directly into the ureter with this catheter and a tray can be made easily. So in our settings, we are being using this pigtail drains. These catheters are made up of polyurethane. there are barcodes on these tubes, 6, 15, 8, 30. The 6 indicates size, the lumen of that nephrostomy tube, that it's a 6 FR and 15 centimeter. Basically, the 6 and 15 centimeter comes in only of those 6 FR tubes. Otherwise, rest of the tubes are having a length of 30 centimeter, whether they are 8 FR, 10, 12 or 14. So, can anyone tell me what are the parts or what are the requirement for the PCNs, or what are the set containers? Let me put a scenario. If you are standing in a ER and you are facing a patient which is having a severe right flank pain, you go for ultrasound and you are having a grossly hydronephrotic kidney with thick pus in it. The patient comes back to you in ER with that ultrasound. How will you proceed in this case? Yes, Dr. Amber.
We will get his coagulation profile, CPC and PTINR. Then we will go for consent, and we will check for the vitals of the patients. If we are doing PCN, local patient is vitally stable, he is maintaining his saturation, and he can maintain prone position or not.
Yes,
And,
right. So prerequisite for the percutaneous nephrostomies are if the patient's coagulation profile is okay, if his hemoglobin is okay, and then you inform the patient about the procedure, that the position of that procedure and what are you going to do with that procedure. If the informed consent is taken, then you take the patient to operation theatre. After going into operation theatre, how we proceed with that patient in operation theatre? What is the position used for the patients to place a PCN? Yes, Dr. Zubair. Positions of the PCN. So I think we should go with the flow. Step 1 is a position, patient's positioning. We usually in our settings we do in prone position, but that's not the only position we can proceed for the PCN. You can go for in supine as well as a left lateral or right lateral position. Surface markings are very important for if we're going for the PCN. So here is how we make a position of patient. We take 2 roll pegs, one at the chest and one at the pelvis side and just below the iliac crest. So what is the effect of this position? This is a below placement of the peg, and this position will show after the placement of the pegs. The abdomen contains like gut, they will fall forward in between them, and then so you can avoid the collateral injuries in this position. Okay, then we go for the surface marking of the patient after positioning of the patient. So what are we surface marking we are having available? Upper border of the iliac crest, the posterior axillary line, the 12th rib, and lateral border of the paraspinous muscle. So this is our window to place in PCN. We mostly prefer the posterior calyx or for the PCN placement, but the dilated calyx, and the one that is dilated calyx is mostly preferred. So after positioning and surface marking, you need to decide that what is the site of your puncture. Then what are the puncture techniques you are using? Puncture techniques we in our centers do with the ultrasound, but this is not the only puncture technique. We can go with the CT guided, with fluoroscopy guided puncture techniques as well. Then after puncture, if you assess the calyx, you pass in a guide wire, and over that guide wire you do a tract dilatation. As far as the tract dilatation is concerned, it depends upon what kind of urine you are draining in that your puncture. If it's a clear urine, you will be dilating your tract up to 6 to 8 FR to put in a PCN of 8 FR. After that tract dilatation, you insert a nephrostomy over the guide wire. This we already discussed, that what is the patient's position and what is the benefit of that prone position, what are the surface markings. So this is ultrasound as well as a fluoro guided combined PCN puncture of that tract. I have seen many that you are looking at the probe and you are inserting a needle far away. This is not the case. You need to insert that needle in the direction of that ultrasound probe, close to it. So after that dilatation of the tract, he has placed a Malicot catheter in the kidney as a nephrostomy tube. So what are the complications we face while we put in nephrostomy tubes? These are most commonly we face the hematuria, and after that the patient may go in sepsis because of drainage of pus from the kidney and pain, adjacent organ injuries. There could be catheter dislodgement that we usually face in our settings. So the next of today's topic is ureteral stents. The first double J stent pigtail was developed by Finney and Haperlin. Ideal stent is easy to insert and ability to relieve the intraluminal and extraluminal obstruction. Ideal tube has excellent flow characteristic. It is resistant to incrustation and infection, chemically stable, and most important is it does not induce patient symptom. So the stents should have a high tensile strength, low friction coefficient, a self-retirement mechanism, and this should be biocompatible as well as affordable. So what are the indication of putting in a DJ stent to relieve the ureteral obstruction, whether it is intrinsic or extrinsic obstruction? Absolute indications for drainage of both kidneys are bilateral ureteric obstruction, unilateral ureteric obstruction in case of single functioning kidney, ureteral obstruction with hydronephrosis, and sepsis. This is here in our centers when the patient is presenting with sepsis, we mostly prefer the PCN placement rather than DJ stent placement. Other indications are urological reconstructive surgeries for splinting of the ureter, and we use the DJ stent in transplant as well, prophylactically before the major abdominal surgeries as well to identify the ureter. Double J stents are being classified on the basis of their material, length, size, and other tubes. So material is very important. They are basically made of polymers, metallic, and biodegradable materials. We'll be first discussing about the polymers. The first polymer that was used as a material for DJ stent was polyethylene. The polyethylene, the problem with that material was that it becomes brittle in urinary medium. It was very much prone to incrustation and blockage and fragmentation as well. So the second material was introduced, that is silicone. That's most biocompatible material. But it was having a high friction coefficient and flexibility. Because of that high flexibility, it was more difficult to go through a tortuous ureter. It is having a poor tensile strength and susceptible to extensive compression as well. The silicone one, which is the most biocompatible material, is not ideal even. Then comes the polyurethane with the more advance of that material sciences. It is having a good tensile strength and does not collapse on extrinsic pressure. But again, the rigidity causes more stent-related symptoms. It is prone to incrustation and colonization. So ideally, that is not a single material that is ideal material for the DJ stent tube. Others are C-Flex, Percuflex, and Fluorofortium. These are the lives of that material in vivo, extending from 6 to 12 months. They are having a variable life. In our centers, we are using a polyurethane double J stents. So these were the polymeric stents. Now we go towards the metallic stent. Metallic stent are including this one. This is the first of metallic stent. They are self-expandable and they are used for a longer period of time. For example, this stent can be placed inside the body for 12 months. They are mostly used for malignant sort of strictures in the ureter. Then the second one, we are having a resonant metallic ureteric stent. The difference between both were that this is tightly packed with the coils. These coils help in flexibility of that stent, as well as they make the stent resistant to the extrinsic compression. They are made up of nickel, cobalt, chromium, and molybdenum alloy wire. having excellent flow characteristic than the usual polyurethane, but it induced patient symptoms more than those of the polyurethane wires. This is another sort of metallic stent where the coils are very lightly pegged than the previous resonant stent. This stent helps us in high flexibility and better drainage than the previous resonant one stent. Okay. Very interesting. Here we are having a Memocath stent. Memocath is basically a self-expandable. It's a thermo-expandable stent in which after it's used for malignant and long-term strictures in the ureter. It also can be retaining in the ureter for 12 months. And it's a thermo-expandable stent. Like once you insert this stent into the ureter, you inject a normal saline at 65 degrees centigrade. So that normal slide at that heat helps it to expand. Juventa stent, this is designed basically to provide a rigidity at the outer surface, because the problem with that stent, this metallic stent, was that they usually migrate it up or down in the bladder. But after modification into the shape of that stent that is made with these wires and coated with PTFE. One other problem was that with Memocath stent, with that they block easily because of the tissue ingrowth in them. So in Juventa stent, they are meshed stent. Meshed stent, that means they provide more rigidity towards the wall and they are less prone to migration. And the second most important thing, on the inner side they are covered with PTFE coating that prevents the blockage of the tube by hyperplastic stent ingrowth of the ureteral tissues. LM stent. As the picture indicates, these stents, this stent have two parts, the ureteral stent and the ureteral part and the bladder part. They are mostly used for the distal ureteric fistulas. The one part is remaining inside the bladder, so it can be easily removed after the ureteric fistulas are healed. The third category was biodegradable stent. They are made up of glycolic acid, polyethylene glycol and barium sulfate. The name of this stent is Uriprane, and it can get degrade inside the body on itself within 2 to 3 months. The length of a stent, this is very important, that the length of a stent, how you measure the length of a stent. Generally, the stents we are using in our centers are of 30 centimeter. The length is a straight part of the ureter and not the coiled one. So we are having different ways to measure the length of the stent.
Just a correction. You go back to PTFE. You see, PTFE is nothing but a substance which is related to plastics.
Yes.
So PTFE stands for polytetrafluoroethylene. It can be coated on any surface. What it does, it reduces the coefficient of friction. So one has to be very clear. It is not something which you have shown is actually a picture which is related to the previous slide. It should not be here because it gives you a wrong impression that this is a PTFE stent. It's not a PTFE stent.
No,
there is no
not.
stent which is a PTFE stent. PTFE is actually a substance which is like a paint. It can be painted on anything. For instance, you have got your own utensils in your houses, and now you have got, for instance, a saucepan and things like that are coated with PTFE. So all those non-stick utensils which you use in your kitchen are actually coated by PTFE. So this PTFE reduces the coefficient of friction, and that is the reason why आपकी रोटी चिपकती नहीं है आपके तवे पे आजकल.
Yes, sir. Yes, the PTFE is a polymer that just coats the inner surface of this metallic stent. This is made of alloy. This is nickel and chromium alloy. This stent is made of that alloy, but it is coated on the interior with this PTFE. So there are different ways to measure the length of DJ stent. So in pediatric age group, what we take is age plus 10 centimeter. That's likely the appropriate length of the DJ stent that is required for the patient. While in adults, 149 to 178 centimeter, a DJ of 22 to 26 centimeter is of adequate length. This is just a rough idea, but we can calculate the length of the DJ stent on a plain X-ray. Plain X-ray length from Xiphus sternum to pubic symphysis is approximate length of that DJ stent that is required for that patient. Another way of measuring is on IVP. In IVP, the distance between PUJ and VUJ is measured as the length of DJ stent. So, the DJ stent being classified on the basis of size as well, they range from 3 to 8 FR. Coatings on the DJ stent is very important. The main goal of that coating is just to prevent the biofilm formation, to prevent the incrustation. It is help in improving the stent handling and improves the patient symptoms as well. We are having various coatings, but broadly classified into a few of them. Like first of all is hydrogel. They are hydrophilic polymers. They basically reduces the friction and increases the elasticity. It's easy to insert and it's more biocompatible as well. The PPS and PVP coatings, they basically help in reduces the inflammatory response, incrustation and biofilm formation. So again, all of the coatings, they help us in prevention of incrustation, biofilm formation and improving the patient's symptoms. We are having.
So when you use this term hydrophilic, that only means that it is something which attracts and absorbs water.
What?
So when it attracts and absorbs water, it becomes something like a jelly.
Okay.
So a jelly is a substance which has got a lot of water in it, and that makes it more supple, more elastic, and it is, again, the friction will be less when you use these kind of coatings.
Coatings, yes. So we are having many type of coating, including diamond-like carbon, ketoralic eluting stands, heparin coated, and PEG-DOPA coated. The few of them, like ketoralic, they are having ketoralic acid in them, so they help in reducing the pain of the patient. PEG-DOPA is a coating that is basically used. This sort of coating help us in reducing the UTI, stent-related UTI. So we are having a variable designs that are used for the DJ stent as well. First of all, we are having a 3F micro stent. This 3F micro stent having proximal anchoring mechanism. The central lumen that drain is same as 4.7 FR DJ that drains. So basically, they are having a good proximal anchoring mechanism. They are less prone to the stent migration. And the other one is a grooved stent. So the grooved stent is basically, you can see that there is a separate groove in an extraluminal site. It's along with the intraluminal tube. So they are helping in a better flow of the urine from the kidney because of they act as a dual lumen drainage. The extraluminal flow will be increased. The intraluminal flow of that tube will be increased as well. Dual lumen stent, this is very good sort of stent that are having dual lumen in there. So urine will be flowing from this as well as from this. If we are placing a dual lumen stent in one patient, it will act similarly if we are placing two DJs in a same ipsilateral side. Right? So this dual lumen stent will act similarly like if we are placing two DJ stent on the ipsilateral side. Spiral stent, this is arranged with a metal ridges and so it accommodates in the pelvis very well. So again, the spiral stent helps in a better stent retention mechanism, and they are less prone to the stent migration. Open pass stent, these stents are basically designed with radial arranged bridges. They help in the stone entrapment. In these pockets, the stone get entrapped, and once you remove the stent, the stone fragments will come with this stent. So we are having other stent with the entry reflex mechanism. As we can see in this picture, while the urine is coming downwards, it will open up, and when the urine is coming backward, it will close. This anti-reflex mechanism of that stent will help in reducing the patient's symptoms like bladder pain and because of the VUR prevention, it is having a less flank pain as well. Tail stent or boy stent, basically these all stent designs are made to prevent those stent migration, incrustation and the patient's symptoms. This is a tail stent in which the upper body is of 7 to 10 FR while the tail is of 3 FR. The tail lies in the bladder, and again this sort of tubes helps us in reducing the patient's symptoms. Another type of stents being used in these days are the magnetic stent. This is again a double J stent with a magnet attached at the lower part of that stent. So what's the benefit of that magnet tip stent is like you can remove this stent without any cystoscopy. You just need a Foley's catheter with a magnet tip on it. You insert the Foley's catheter and this DJ will come out with that catheter. Dangler's stent, they are the stent attached with polyethylene wires. The wires hang outside of the urethra. So when the times come and we are expecting the DJ stent to be removed, a patient can remove itself by pulling out that strings.
Now, before going into complications, let me ask one question to my colleague Haris. Haris, you have got a lot of options available. Now, she has very well covered up the topic, from simplest stents like Melicot to these kind of stents which have got a tip of say a magnetic material. That makes your life easier, or is it something which makes your life difficult as an endourologist?
Everything has got its indication, and again I would like to say that if a patient comes to us with any obstructive uropathy which has got external compression, we always place the same DJ which we place. We don't think that we should be offering something to that patient. I had a very big discussion with Dr. Nazish when she was here, and she showed me an image of a malignant patient, and his ureters were completely blocked and the patient was on PCN. So she asked me that how to go about it in a patient like this who has got a malignancy and you cannot offer him much. So what should be done in a patient? I said place a DJ stent. She said DJ cannot be placed. I said place a PCN. She said PCN is already placed, but how long that patient will go on PCN? So she showed me a picture of a stent which was placed subcutaneously from the kidney to the bladder. And I was astonished to see that stent, and I said that this is experimental. She said no, this is written in literature, and these stents are being placed in UK for malignant patients who have got controlled disease, but you cannot offer them much about that ureters. So they cannot go along whole life, 10 years.
And they are also mentioned in the text, in one of the books written on prostate cancer by Michael J. Copcott. And those stents were actually made up of titanium.
Yes,
they were missed here somewhere.
Yeah.
So those were the titanium stents. You see, when you go into practice, as Haris was rightly said, and Manzoor Sahab will bear me out, then you have got a lot of, say, situations and scenarios into which you are in a fix if you want to put yourself as somebody who wants to take decisions. For instance, it's not a simple case of a stone that has been fragmented by lithotripsy and you want to take away something called obstruction, or maybe something called a greater amount of gravel that would block the ureter. This is one indication of placing a stent, but what kind of a stent? So if you have got a lot of options available, then you might take out something which is known as a spiral stent with serrations on it, so that it can lead to passage of gravel easily rather than just doing away with obstruction. So it depends upon your wish list. Again, what do you want to have? For instance, if this is something which is like a drainage of a pus which is not so thick, then you might have got another stent available for it. But if it's a condition of maybe ureteroneocystoplasty in transplantation, where you think that you only want a little bit of maybe 7 days stenting of your anastomotic line, your wish is something different. So your wishes will be different from upper tract to lower tract to whatever, and on that way you will actually pick and choose one stent which is actually for that condition and that patient, not a blanket sort of a stent which we have. We don't have the luxury of these kind of stents. For instance, in Belgium, in Denmark, they don't use these stents which need to be removed. They use biodegradable stents because they have got a lot of patients earlier in their experience, which we have now, who have been neglected. They again come in after a few weeks or maybe months with encrustation, and that led to renal failure. For them, it was something which impressed upon them to think something like biodegradable stents. So it's a very interesting topic, and this is one of the inventions of modern day urology. So this is a 21st century urology which started, to my understanding, with the invention of a JJ stent.
I totally agree. And commenting on this picture, this stent was not getting a lot of popularity in Pakistan because a few centers used it. Even I guess we also used this string stent, and the patients used to say something was coming out and they pulled the stent, and the main aim of that stent was not done. Another thing I would like to comment there, because all the residents are sitting over here, that whenever you place that stent, you need to know what is the indication of that stent placement. We are using unnecessary DJ stenting. In a patient, we perform URS, we have fragmented the stone. Those small stones will come out in the evening. But we place unnecessary DJ stents, and then those patients forget that DJ stents, and we have got a very big problem about forgotten DJs, encrusted DJs. I had a very big discussion on social media with all the stone gurus and all. So the onus of this stent lies on the person who has placed the stent. He has to remove that stent. If that stent remains over there, you are responsible for that stent. So whenever you are discharging the patient, tell that patient that you have got a stent and this needs to be removed in 4 to 6 weeks by hook or by crook. Otherwise your kidney will be gone.
And one thing more, just the last statement to our junior colleagues. You see, whenever you want to use something, whenever you want to place in a stent, for instance, inside the body, you must understand, take your time, read about it. What is the material that you are actually inserting and placing in a milieu which is under physiological controls? Second thing is, there is something which is like mechanics or the mechanical engineering principle attached to it. There is some physics attached to it. So if you don't understand the physics of placement of a simple thing like DJ stent, if you don't understand the quality of material, or what is the composition of that material, what is the design of that stent, then you will not be able to justify yourself. You will be then hostage of somebody who wants to sell his or her stent to you. So don't make yourself as somebody who is a urologist, who is a hostage to marketing strategies of different companies. They would like to sell their products, but it's us who must know the science. So if we know the science, we can argue. If we know the science, we can advocate the rights of patients. Otherwise, we'll be putting in and taking out something for the sake of money and nothing else. So please do make yourself comfortable with science and scientific principles. Yes, we are all students of biology, but this is something where we have introduced inert materials into biological fields, and that would create something like, for instance, encrustation, which is not needed. Encrustation is something which is iatrogenic, but it is pathological. So if we have introduced something on ourselves, then we must know what's the mechanism behind it so that we can minimize the complications.
So I would like to ask a question from you and Professor Manzoor, that have we used these metallic stents or any stents other than the stents we are placing any time?
No, we have not used this metallic stents for the ureter. But I remember we have used these metallic stents for urethra a few years back. This wall stent and other things. But in our experience, the use of stents in urethra was not good. So metallic stents. Wall stent and Mamocath were used for ureteric strictures and for the prostate. But in our experience, it was number one was costly, and migration and incrustation was the main issue. But as I think this was an excellent topic she has presented, and we have many options. So we should find out which one is the best to prevent the complications. And then we should recommend that stent for future use here from this knowledge.
Are these dangerous stents they are expensive?
No, I haven't gone through the cost of that stent.
No, it is just a simple stent, but they have just placed a string at the end, and you can pull it out yourself.
I think we can also tie a thread while we are doing it. Then we can pull out the start.
This last
In our
stent,
digital.
which she has shown, is being used in Pakistan.
Yes, could I ask a question? Do you have any publication from SIUT on the success rate and failure rate of stent, so that every resident can read it? What is the data, where we are moving towards? So do we have any science?
Yeah. Asad.
Yes, sir. We do have a few papers on placements of stents in transplant, and they were published, and we can reproduce and give it to you. The thing is, what's the science behind it? We look the science from the way it causes complications and the way it gives you some benefit. So you can find out in those articles why they have been placed, what's the thought behind placement of stents in ureteroneocystostomies, whether they are protective or ureteroneocystostomy, or whether they invite something called infection in a very precious patient like immunosuppressed transplant patient. So these are the things that we have dwelled into, but not in so much of vastness that we can cover the whole topic in different fields of urology.
And there was also a thesis on this double J stents by Dr. Nawaz, Haq Nawaz Mangal, for his MS thesis. So anybody who is interested to read our data, it was during the, I think, late 90s or 2000. So anybody who is interested to read about the local use of stents in our setup can read that thesis as well. It's in the library.
So the complication related to the stents are stent symptoms, migration, incrustation, fracture of the stent, forgotten stents, and a life-threatening complication as well, uterine erosion or fistulization with vessels. So we quickly go through the cystoscope. So a cystoscope was first introduced in 1879. We are having two types of the cystoscope, rigid as well as a flexible scopes. So here we are having a cystoscope constructed. They are having ocular pieces, a light pillar, a working element. This is basically the bridge of the cystoscope, and this is the sheet of the cystoscope with the inlet and outlet channels. Here this number indicates that what is the size of that sheet. These two numbers indicate that the ureteric catheter of two ureteric catheter of each 6 FR can be passed through this 22 FR sheet, while this 9 indicates that a single ureteric catheter of a 9 FR can pass through this sheet. This is a bridge of this cystoscope, and it is having two parts. The first one is the ocular part, another one is a working part. This is a light pillar and ocular part. This is a sheet with its numbering on it. This is a beak of sheet, and this is objective window over here. So The cystoscope can be explained in the parts like sheet, obturator, bridge, light cable, telescope, and irrigating channels. These
So,
are
just a word. Technically speaking, when you talk about telescope, then there is an eyepiece and an objective. So number 2 is actually the eyepiece, and the end, which is number 11 and 10, is actually the objective. So whenever you refer to any microscope or a telescope, you always use these two terms, eyepiece and the objective.
So these are cystoscope sheet. We are having this sheet will be having a few parts. This is the sheet beak. This is the inlet and outlet channels, and there is a locking mechanism over here. This sheet, like the 17 FR sheet and the other sheet, there is only a difference. The single difference between them is that the 17 FR sheets will be having a 2 hole, while the other sheets beyond the 17 FR will be having a single large hole. This sheet is used for a cystoscopy in female because of the shorter length. The female urethra cannot be dilated. If we are inserting this scope inside the female urethra, it will cause a leak of irrigating fluid from there, and the urethra will not be dilated. So we prefer to use this FR sheets in the females. So we are having different sort of obturator as well. The obturator are basically it helps to support the sheet, not to injure the other urethra and other parts of that urethra. So we are having different types of obturator for different types of scopes and resectoscopes. Bridges. These are called as telescope bridges. These telescope bridges is basically having a 2 parts, the telescope channel for which we insert the telescope, and there's the accessories channel, and here is a rubber attached on it to help support to insert the guide wires and ureteric catheter from here. And the types of bridges are like with one side channel, 2 side channels, or without any side channel. So here we are having a telescope. This telescope basically having a 2 parts. The one is eyepiece. This is the light pillar, and this is the shaft of telescope. Telescope's diameter are 4 millimeter, but the length of telescope are 30 centimeter. This is the only. This telescope does not change with the change of cystoscope sheet. These telescope can be adjusted in any type of cystoscopic sheet. So this is most important that we use what is the telescope lens angle. We are having 0, 30 and 70 degree angle. These telescope basically come as in color coding, the green, red and the yellow one. These indicate the angle of that lens over there. So these are the coding. The 0 is for the green, and 30 degree they will be coded with red, yellow and white with 120 degree.
But there are other lenses also. For instance, you have got 60 degree lens, and you have got also 45 degree lens. So you can have different kind of lenses, but these are the lenses that are normally used. For instance, 120 degree is something which is very difficult to understand, but it is for if you're doing a cystoscopy, then if you want to see the roof, then this will give you the advantage of seeing the roof rather than just the posterior wall or the floor. So when you use all these lenses, you got to know where the cut is and what you are seeing. When your instrument is 180 degree with 30 degree lens, you are actually seeing below, not to the 0 angle. So it all depends upon your imagination, and again, the parallax is the physics.
So here are the uses of that telescope. The 0 degree telescopes are used basically for the ureteroscopy to visualize the ureter. 30 degree is used for the visualization of base. And with this,
For instance, sorry, I just want to cut you here because this is very important, and here we do mistakes. If you use a 0 degree lens, if you rotate the whole instrument, you will always see the posterior wall. You cannot see the lateral walls or the floor or the roof unless and until you move your hand. You just distort your angle. If you want to have a 30 degree lens, and if your instrument is straight, which means 180 degree, then you have to rotate either to the left or the right, up or down, and this will give you not the posterior wall but all these
base.
4 walls. So intelligent use of cystoscope and lenses will give you a better picture of of the bladder. Otherwise, with a 0-degree lens, and somebody will always test you. If he is an examiner or she is an examiner, giving you a telescope with a 0-degree lens and say to you, just give me where the floor is. You can't see the floor with 0-degree lens unless and until you move your hand up or down.
Another one is a 70-degree lens that is basically helps in visualization of bladder dome. Again, you have to rotate to see the other structures. 120 help in visualizing the anterior bladder side, the dome and the anterior wall of the bladder. So we are having the lens system as well. This was a conventional lens system, and we are here in these days using this rod lens system. This whole egg is a lens in cystoscopy. So what are the advantages of these rod lens on the conventional lens system? They give us a wide viewing angle and better brightness and higher resolution than the other system. This is the tower we use for cystoscopy. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice talking.
Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Sir, may I say something about urethropy, cystoscopy? Just one point that urethropy should be done under VN, not blind. Don't pass the cystoscope blindly because it can damage the urethra. Except in females, you can pass cystoscope without any camera. But just a point that in males, don't pass the urethoscope or cystoscope blindly, means without camera or without IVN. So this is the one point how we can prevent the urethral damage because of use of urethoscope. But in females can be used without camera.
Right. Thank you very much.